Today I will tell you about one of the most terrifying legends of the internet. I'm talking about Russian sleep experiment. This story is roaming around the depths of the internet for many years now, and it believed to be invented in some forum where members was to compete with each other in creating the most terrifying legend. It has never been confirmed, and it's quite possible that this story is real. The Russian sleep experiment was allegedly conducted at the end of the 1940s in a Soviet-era test base. The task was to find out what happens to a person if he is kept awake for a long time. 5 political prisoners were chosen for this experiment, with the promise of freedom at the end. It was a lie, because as you will hear below, after the experiment, the men will not be in such condition to be released back into society. Test subjects were placed in a gas chamber, in which an experimental gas was sprayed. With its help, it was planned to keep the prisoners awake for 30 days. To observe the subjects, a microphone was placed inside the gas chamber, and it had several small windows. In the first couple of days everything went as planned. The gas apparently worked, because none of the men were unable to fall asleep, while also not exhibiting uncharacteristic behavior. In the 5th day, the prisoners began to have episodes of paranoia, and began to complain about the conditions in the chamber. Each of them slowly reduced contact with each other and isolated themselves from each other. Observing this behavior, scientists conducted that it could be caused by the gas or from long-term lack of sleep. In the 9th day of the experiment, one of the subjects started bawling uncontrollably in full throat. None of the other participants did not respond to yelling in any way. After several hours of constant yelling, he snapped his own vocal cords and became mute. After a moment, another test subject also started to scream, but this time it was impossible to visually observe his behavior, because other prisoners covered the small windows of the cell with pages of books and their own feces. Following days, the only possible way to know what was happening in the room was to listen to the subjects through the microphones. They did not make a sound, but when communicating through the intercom, they gave short answer that everything was fine. In order to understand what happens to the prisoners, the scientists turned off the gas supply on the 15th day and opened the chamber. The test subjects were against it because they thought that turning off the gas would make them fall asleep. Opening the chamber doors, they found out that one of the 5 men was dead. Several pieces of meat had been torn off from the body of the deceased, which the other 4 survivors had stuffed into the drainage pipe. It was sealed, and a huge pool of blood was formed on the floor. The survivors had pulled out their own muscles and even some of the internal organs. They were eaten or simply thrown to the ground. Despite their fatal injuries, they were alive and begged the scientists not to cut off the gas supply. Soldiers were brought in to get the test subjects out of the chamber. They resisted aggressively and killed one of the soldiers. When it was finally succeeded, only 3 prisoners were alive. Despite their massive injuries, they displayed inhuman strength and resistance to the injected sedative drugs. The army, which had ordered this experiment, ordered scientists, against their will, to put the remaining 3 subjects back into the gas chamber. Before the chamber was closed, one of the men died. The army commander also had 3 scientists trapped in it, but one of them immediately pulled out the gun and shot the commander as well as one of the test subjects in the head. One of the last 2 test subjects escaped the chamber. Fearing for his life, the scientist shot the last prisoner, but before doing so, made him identify himself. Prisoner, before his death, smiled and said that together with the other test subjects of the experiment, there were evil in the human mind, which is controlled by the sleep. After the fatal shot, he uttered his last words, which were, "So close to freedom." Do you think this story is fictional or based on true events? See you next time.